a headcanon that Clint Howard in this episode is playing the same character as the baby in the Corbinite maneuver from the original series, and he's just got a Benjamin Button thing going on. Hello interwebs and welcome to the final installment of my Star Trek Discovery Season 1 Retro Review series, which I've been doing in preparation for Star Trek Discovery's 5th and final season premiering later this week that I am so pumped about and excited to review for all of you. But today we are going to be reviewing the final 2 episodes of the series premiere season, The War Within, The War Without, as well as Will You Take My Hand? Normally I would have reviewed these episodes separately, but I decided to do them jointly here for a few different reasons. The first reason is that I wanted to finish off this review series before Season 5 started up. The second reason is that I've been so damn busy finishing up my own movie identity, so instead of putting these two together just gives me a little less of a workload. The third reason is that this is my channel and I'll do what I want, damn it. But the fourth and most important reason is that these 2 episodes really work best in conjunction with each other, because separately, and especially in the case of The War Within, The War Without, I wouldn't have a ton to say otherwise. Which, by the way, leads me to my first significant criticism, which is to say that while I like a lot of things about these 2 episodes, they just feel like they're trying to race to the finish line of the Klingon War arc and the first season. With Discovery, both the ship and the show, jumping back into the Klingon War 9 months after they left it to go gallivant around in the Mirror Universe, we missed so much that I feel was necessary to be able to tell this story well. As a result, so many exciting stories that relate to the war that could have deepened this show's ongoing themes of anti-fascism are simply just told to us instead of depicted, or shown quickly and then moved on from without much explanation or exploration so that we can go and wrap up this storyline by the season's end.
Stardate 4789.6, Klingon vessels launch hypothermic charges at Cal 46, burning off their atmosphere and killing 11,000 civilians instantly. Stardate 4851.5, a cloaked raider tails the USS Saratoga into space dock at Starbase 22, then ignites its antimatter supply in a suicide mission.
The first of these comes with the arrival of Admiral Cornwell and Starfleet onto the USS Discovery, instantly greeting our crew with phasers and hostility. Not only because Discovery was presumed destroyed when the Mirror Universe Discovery was blown up in this universe, but also because Starfleet in the intervening 9 months has become more and more desperate as it is on the brink of losing the Klingon War, and thus lost a lot of its adherence to its core values. We see this clearly when Sarek instantly forcibly mind melds with Saru without his consent.
Ambassador, what are you doing?
What the times require.
Mirroring a scene from Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. But unlike that movie where the mind meld is portrayed rightfully as an assault, even with my complicated feelings on Spock making that choice, it's mainly done here in Discovery just so that the Discovery crew won't have to prove that they are who they say they are to Admiral Cornwell. How much more interesting would it have been if we had actually explored how much Starfleet had changed since the Discovery had left this universe? Have they become more fascistic like Lorca was trying to push them to back earlier in the war? Sadly, we never really get to see this. We get a little hints of it in some of the choices that Starfleet makes, both in this episode and the next one, such as them listening to Mir Georgiou's plan to destroy Kronos and putting her in charge of the mission in order for them to wash their hands of responsibility, but we really don't get to see much more of how Starfleet as an institution itself has shifted, which I think is a huge missed opportunity. Secondly, we are told a lot about how the Klingon side of the war has shifted in the 9 months as well. While Starfleet has been on the back foot, the Klingons are almost as much at war with each other and their different factions as they are with the Federation, having splintered without a strong authoritarian leader to guide them like T'Kuvma or Kor, and thus them using the Federation as cannon fodder in search of their own tribalistic glory.
In the absence of a clear leader, the Klingon houses are divided once again. At the start of this war, we fought one enemy. Now, we fight 24.
This is a fantastic setup that could have shown that the ideology of survival of the fittest, or might makes right, that underpins so much of the fascistic nature that T'Kuvma preached, ultimately leads to infighting amongst fascists, something that we also touched upon with Mirror Universe Lorca in the last episode of the Mirror Universe arc. Yet, sadly, we never see any of this infighting within the different Klingon factions. We're just vaguely told that it's happening. There's not even really any prominent Klingon characters besides L'Rell, who spends most of her time in these episodes within a cell. The only other Klingons that we see are arguably Ash Tyler and the Klingons that are in the background of Kronos. This is so disappointing given how much weight characters like T'Kuvma, Kor, and Voq, and L'Rell were given in the first half of the season. But we don't get any of it because the show took the Mirror Universe detour and has a presumed desire to start season 2 on something fresh rather than continuing the Klingon war arc. We do get some philosophical discussions around these ideologies, such as in the scene where Cornwell goes and interrogates L'Rell and confronts her and T'Kuvma's anti-collectivist rhetoric that vilifies diversity, equity, inclusion, as well as how this belief in racial purity can be co-opted for fascistic infighting and a desire for power.
No one is looking to destroy your culture. Our laws are founded in equality, freedom.
T'Kuvma taught us that the Federation cannot help itself. It seeks universal homogenization and assimilation.
T'Kuvma was an ignorant fool.
But it's something that I would have liked to see play out in more than just simple philosophical arguments. And I say that as someone who loves Star Trek characters sitting around a table and doing philosophical arguments. That said, there are some strong character beats in this episode that I do love. Tyler being back to his human self but still figuring out who he is well handled throughout this episode, precisely because it relates to the season's themes of how our relationship and connection with others helps make us who we are, and allows us not only to understand and humanize others, but ourselves as well. It also allows the show to have those good old Star Trek feels when Tilly and the crew reach out to Tyler in the mess hall, or even through Stamets, who, even through his understandable anger at Tyler for killing his husband, still reaffirms Tyler's personhood.
Does it gut you? Does it sicken you? Good. Maybe you're still human after all.
It's a nice touch that speaks to how these characters still uphold Starfleet values, even when Starfleet as an institution itself does not. And ultimately goes to this idea that it is not the institution of Starfleet that helps uphold the infinite diversity and infinite combinations ethos that we so believe, but the people that make it up. An understanding that other modern Star Trek shows, like Strange New Worlds, I feel have somewhat lost in the intervening years.
We know our purpose is to protect the mission.
That said, I don't particularly love the story beat where Tilly and others pressure Burnham to go and see Tyler, the man who assaulted her, as she has every right to never wish to see him again.
Tyler needs you.
Told he's doing well.
It's not possible, not when you've lost the person you care about the most.
He killed a Starfleet officer. And he tried to kill me.
And those crimes are reprehensible. But Tyler is not the person who did that. At least he's not anymore. He is something other.
That said, their scene where they do confront each other is excellent, with them both lashing out and sharing how they hurt each other, with Tyler ultimately showing that he has earnestly changed to someone new and wishes to make amends for his actions rather than just trying to avoid blame. I also love that Saru acknowledges Burnham did well in the Mirror Universe, even despite her saving Georgiou and lying to him about the Kelpians within that universe.
Saving Georgiou may indeed prove to be a grave error in judgment, but no one else could have done what you did aboard that Terran flagship.
I also love Sarek reaching out to Burnham, doing better than he did in his first appearance this season, acknowledging who Burnham is, not forcing Vulcanness or his expectations upon her, tying again into themes of how the best policy is to let someone be themselves, not force them to live up to some racial, institutional, or societal expectation that leads to regimented and dictated roles that fascism itself thrives upon as an ideology.
I've made foolish choices. Emotional choices.
Well, you are human.
The back half of the plot of The War Within, The War Without is mainly focused on technobabble science stuff to pass the time until the finale, so I don't have too much to say about it. However, Georgiou, being put in charge of the Discovery, is played more cartoonishly than menacingly, making the rest of our crew beyond Saru and Burnham look somewhat dumb for not figuring it out earlier.
Scared Kelpian looks for tough Kelpian. Have you gotten tough since we served together on the St. John, Mr. Saru?
Affirmative, Captain. Very tough. So much so that many find me simply unpalatable.
Moving on to the finale though, I do love the plot concept of the trip to Kronos in the finale much better. Going to the Klingon homeworld to blow it up, only for Burnham to see that it is a thriving cultural city that allows her to view the Klingons as whole people, not enemies, is a neat idea. One that nicely touches upon many of the relevant themes of the season, but again, it's strangely executed. First off, we mainly just see a tent city when they go to Kronos. And that town is primarily populated by Orions, humans, and Trills. The Klingons that we encounter are just mostly in the background, which partially defeats the point of the intended message. Now, I get that Discovery wanted to show that the Klingon homeworld and society has just as much intercultural interaction as the Federation does, despite their attempts to claim differently that they're a pure society. But it's done so quickly and in the background without much depth that it doesn't really land. At the very least, though, this trip to Kronos does give us confirmation that Klingons have two penises, so I can forgive a lot for that. The side quest to the Orion brothel, though, is rather tedious, especially in a finale, and is even more so given that it's used to show that Empress Georgiou is pansexual, which perpetuates the problematic trope of bi and pansexuality being associated with moral ambiguity or evil, something made worse given the season's earlier bury your gaze choice. Don't get me wrong, I always stand a problematic bisexual queen, but I do wish we had gotten more bisexuality, especially considering that Star Trek has often used this evil bisexual trope, especially as it relates to the Mirror Universe. That being said, thank God Michelle Paradise did a mostly better job by this show's queer characters when she took over in mid-season 2 onwards. I also enjoy Burnham's backstory that she shares with Tyler in this episode about her parents' murder and childhood trauma at the Klingons' hands, which informs her actions in the pilot episode. It allows her to discuss how these traumas inform who she is today, but does not dictate her actions as they did at the Battle of the Binary Stars, leading to her willingness to try something new in this finale, rather than just acting out of trauma to punch back and destroy the Klingons.
My dad tried to barricade the kitchen door while my mom hid me in a cabinet. And I couldn't see, but I could hear everything.
That said, and this is not this episode's fault, her backstory is made a little bit more convoluted by season 2 with it adding the whole angel time travel suit that her mom made next season. It does make me think though how it is really funny that a lot of people argue that Discovery season 1 made Michael Burnham the most important person in the universe, when really it never does. The things that make her unique from a storytelling and universe standpoint, like her mutiny, are much more a part of her story as a person than the random angel suit that helps save all life in the galaxy that just so happens to be made by Burnham's mom makes her. And even season 3 and 4 don't make Burnham the most important person in the galaxy. It's really only season 2 with its red angel suit being happened to be made by Burnham's mom's storyline. It's almost as if a confident, competent black woman lead character is seen as needing justification by certain types on the internet. I wonder why that is. All that said, Burnham's final speech to Starfleet saying that she's going to do a mutiny in order to stand up for Starfleet's values, rather than what she did in the pilot, which was go against Starfleet's values, I feel like is a nice capstone to this entire arc for her character this season.
A year ago, I stood alone. I believed that our survival was more important than our principles. I was wrong. Do we need a mutiny today? To prove who we are.
In the end, on a thematic and character level, I really do like this story's climax. Burnham reaching out to L'Rell and trying to forge a new style of a relationship with the Klingons, while also standing up to Cornwell and vicariously Starfleet as an institution in another mutiny, but this time in service of Starfleet's values rather than reacting in fear against them, is a neat subversion and conclusion to this season's ongoing themes of overcoming fear with hope, empathy, and connection and belief in others. It even fits L'Rell's character, given how we've seen that while she's fallen into the radicalizing viewpoints of Takuma, she has shown the potential to grow, change, and speak to unity over purity. However, all of this is not given as much depth as it could have been given how quickly it's done. Burnham and L'Rell have never really spoken to each other before this moment in the series, and I would have rather have these characters have much more conflict that ultimately get resolved here that feels emblematic of the larger Klingon War storyline, but we never really get that because these characters have never interacted. We also haven't seen enough of where the Klingons and Starfleet are at this point in the storyline to feel how impactful Burnham's resistance is to their viewpoints. If we had seen more of who the Klingons had changed to be, who Starfleet had changed to be, and how Burnham is actually representing a distinct different viewpoint from both of them, it would have let this really hit harder. But sadly, we don't really get to see that. This is the perfect way to end this story, but it wasn't perfectly earned. It's frustrating because this would have been so potent if the show hadn't taken the Mirror Universe detour or had saved this storyline for more episodes in a season 2. As it stands, this season's ending with Burnham giving a speech at Starfleet against fear and a new captain for Discovery on the horizon on Vulcan, who we never get to meet because Captain Pike screws him over in season 2, is a genuinely standout sequence and a heartwarming and good thematic end to this season's theme of anti-fascism. I just wish it had come after a much more substantial build-up.
We have to be torchbearers, casting the light so we may see our path to lasting peace. We will continue exploring, discovering new worlds, new civilizations.
All in all, this finale perfectly encapsulates this season of Discovery as a whole. It's an excellent thematic discussion on how to fight back against fascism's attempt to traumatize us into isolating ourselves from others and our own emotions and selves, and doing so through connection and understanding. It's a story that's also bolstered by really excellent character interactions and moments. But it's sadly let down because it's not allowed to be as impactful as it could have been if it had just stayed on task and explored its ideas within a single storyline with more depth, instead of constantly getting distracted by new avenues and storylines that it uses to explore its ideas. I honestly think that this season has the opposite problem of most future seasons of Discovery, as well as Star Trek Picard, especially season 2, in that this season's story could have sustained much more than it did, and I wish it had been given more time. Future Star Trek seasons often feel like they're being stretched out a little bit too long, but here, this really could have gone on for a 20-episode season. Or at the very least, splitting the Mirror Universe and Klingon War storylines into 2 separate seasons. All that being said, I will argue that this is still probably the strongest first season of a live-action Star Trek series since, at the very least, Deep Space Nine, and arguably the original series. Again, note the emphasis on live action there, because Prodigy and Lower Decks had excellent first seasons. Despite having tried to do too much, it all threaded together in exciting and new ways, and all felt like they were trying to make the same point. Not only that, the character work, which is essential to any Star Trek show's survival, was the real standout here, with so many new characters being introduced to a franchise that I love, and whom I've come to love over the show's 5 seasons. While the season was undoubtedly flawed, Discovery's first season revitalized Star Trek for a modern era. It gave the franchise new ways to explore the final frontier, both in its storytelling and who gets to tell those stories both in front of and behind the camera. Not all of its storytelling choices were good, and while some were fixed and others were exacerbated in future seasons, the show has always and did always try something new, which is not always the case with big franchises, not even Star Trek nowadays. As a certain captain once said, risk is our business, and I truly wish that more Star Trek, hell, more big franchises today, given that we live in an era of endless franchise installments, would learn from. Discovery's first season, for all of its flaws, did what every Star Trek show should do: explore strange new stories, characters, and ideas that the franchise hasn't seen before, that try to speak to issues of today by showing us a potential tomorrow that may not always have gotten over the same issues that we are dealing with today, but which strives to face those challenges by focusing on our better selves, in hopes of enabling our better selves today watching the show. And that's what Discovery, over its 5 seasons, has always done, and I am excited and also bittersweetly saddened to see it come to an end over the next few weeks. But Discovery set a path for new Star Trek right here with this season, and I, for one, am glad for it. With all that said, I hope you've enjoyed this retro review series of Season 1. I'll be reviewing Season 5 in just a few short days, but beyond all of that, I hope you all, my friends, live long and prosper.